The journey begins at the narrow gate. The journey, Jesus beckons me to roam. The journey, where the path is straight. The journey takes me home. The journey takes me home.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to The Journey. This morning, our guest is Joline Moore. Welcome, Joline.
Thank you.
You're probably wondering who I am and why I'm here. My name is Randy Kalm, and Michael is spending some time with his family because his oldest daughter is in town. So I told him I'd help him out. So I want to give a little background about Joline. She is the leader of Hands for Christ, which meets on Wednesdays from 10 to 1. She is also the head of, well, along with her husband Steve and Paula and Ron Wood, they are the coordinators for the church home groups. And also, along with her husband, they lead the missions. And she and I have a little bit of history together. We were on a mission trip 4 years ago, coming up the end of this month, in Ciudad Juarez for a week, more than a week. I think there were about 10 of us or so who went. Pretty life-changing. We were supposed to go on another one right about now, right? Mm-hmm. And of course, because of COVID, it was canceled, and we are now scheduled for next November. Is that correct?
Right.
So that's a little background on Joline, and welcome.
Thank you.
For this time together. And so I guess I'll just leave it to you. This is Joline's journey. And so we're happy to have you. And why don't you lead us off?
Okay. Well, I was born in 1952 in Northern California. The hospital I was born in was in Chico, California, which is north of Sacramento. But I actually was living in Paradise, California.
Which I found remarkable.
And it no longer exists the way my memory has it, or anything I remember about the town of Paradise. When I was little in the 50s, I don't even think we had a stoplight. When I visited in high school, my grandparents lived there. They had one stoplight. So it's just a very small, very tight community. And I can't even imagine it gone to fire.
I know. When you told me this the other day, I just couldn't believe that you lived in Paradise. Yeah. And now it doesn't.
Yeah. So the house that we lived in when I was born, my dad and my grandfather built. My grandparents lived through a bunch of forests. I mean, probably a block, if that far away. No houses around us. We were at the end of a road. And they had built my grandparents' house. And later on, my grandfather was a pastor for Church of the Brethren, which is a Protestant denomination originating much like the Mennonites, Amish, a plain folk kind of a church. And my grandfather was a pastor in Paradise at the time when I was born. And later, he went back as a retired pastor and was a pastor for a while there again, and they built a retirement house, and I visited it in high school, in junior high and high school. So I spent a lot of time in Paradise, and to even imagine that the little store, mom and pop store we walked to down the road is gone. The church that I was born into, that I remember, have so many memories of, is gone. My grandparents, all of our houses are gone. So to even think of what it looks like or what it exists like now is real hard. Yeah.
Wow.
So, but anyway, I lived there for 6 years. My dad was a high school art teacher. My mom was a kindergarten teacher, so I came from a teaching family. Like I said, my grandfather was a a pastor and had been his whole life. Came from the Midwest and came out to California and was a pastor in lots of places, Portland, California, lots of places. So anyway, and we lived there in this little tiny house until I was 6. And then my dad went back to school and became a pastor for Churches of Brethren. And we moved to Boise, Idaho, and spent 4 years there. Probably as childhood memories go, probably the best childhood memories that I have. And a lot of them were based around church. I know I mentioned something to you when I watched Ray Copeland's journey. Pastor, I think one of the questions said is when did you know, when do you have recollection of Jesus, or when did Jesus come into your life? And he said he's always been there my entire life. I don't remember a time without him. And I remember saying out loud, yeah, that's it. Because I don't have any recollection of life without Jesus and God in my life. When I was born into a home and a family that was our way of life. That's what our life revolved around.
That's the way it was.
Yeah, and it was good, and it was happy, and it was wonderful. There was no harsh judgmental God. There was no anything like that you hear of so many small churches or so many places that, that he's a taskmaster and he's a harsh God.
Loving and inclusive.
Yeah, and that's the way our family was. And he was just praying at every meal, praying before I went to bed, having Bible stories read to me, going to church 3 times a week. That was just what we did. Didn't everybody do that?
Well, no wonder I like you so much. My upbringing was very much like that.
Yeah, that's what you said.
We were lucky.
Yeah, very lucky. And so having my dad be a pastor was like the best thing in the world. My grandpa was, my dad should be, that kind of thing. And so for 4 years in Idaho, it was in right on the outskirts of Boise. So we had irrigation ditches, we swam in those, rode bikes, went to church camp, folded church bulletins for my dad in the office, sang. My mom led the choir, taught Sunday school. It just was pretty typical of that kind of time, I guess, in our family. But it came to an abrupt halt when I was in 5th grade. My parents got a divorce, and that was very traumatic. And I should relay that story, maybe. I don't know. Anyway, it takes too long.
Not necessarily. You can share whatever you want.
When I was in 5th grade, we had gone at Christmas time to visit my grandparents in Northern California. Excuse me. And the teacher came up to me and quietly said during class time, "You need to pack your things up out of your desk. Your dad's going to come pick you up." And I hadn't heard anything about this as a 10-year-old. It didn't sound familiar to me. And I said, "Why?" And she said, "Well, I don't know." She says, "I just need you to get your stuff." And I said, "Well, I'll just take my assignments. You have my assignments and I'll be back." And she said, "No, you need to pack up your desk. Take everything that belongs to you and leave your books." Again, being persistent that I was, I said, "I don't understand. Can you explain this to me?" And she said, "No, your dad will be here. You can talk to your dad." So I did what I was told and put my stuff in whatever I carried it in. And my dad came, and my first question, of course, was, "Why did I have to get my stuff? Where are we going?" And he said, "Your mom and your brother and yourself are going to go visit your grandma and grandpa in California. So I need you to take your stuff." And I said, "But if we're visiting, I should just come back to it." And he said, "Well, your mom will explain this to you, but you're going to take a trip and you need your stuff." And I must have asked him 10 more times being a child. But when I got home, my mom was crying. She was putting things in suitcases. I kept trying to get an adult to answer me, and nobody would really give me an answer. And I know, looking back, they couldn't do that. And we talked about that as a generational time where you didn't tell your children everything. You didn't explain everything to them. They were too little. They were children. But it was real hard time of not understanding and not getting it.
Absolutely.
So we went to my grandparents, and not long after, a Beacon van came and dumped a bunch of boxes, at my grandparents' house. And I said my goodbye to my dad at the house because someone else from church took us to the airport. So this was all very strange and confusing to me. We had not done anything except as a family. So to have this happen was really emotional. My mom couldn't explain it to me.
Yeah, right out of the blue.
Yeah.
Thinking everything is
great. Yeah, being a kid, I mean, you don't hear any of the problems, you don't see the problems. So, yeah, life was okay. And why did this happen? But I don't remember questioning God about it. Maybe it's being a child, but I don't remember saying, why me? How come me? God, what have you done? Why is this happening? It just was confusing. I was just confused. And I didn't see my dad then for a couple years. We moved to my grandparents' house in Paradise and stayed there. My mom got a teaching job in Southern California. And so for the rest of my 5th grade year, I went to school in Paradise. Then I moved to Laverne, California, which is in the foothills of California near LA. And we lived there until I was through 6th grade, and my mom got remarried, and we moved to Pomona, right next door, city right next door, and went to junior high and high school there. And when we went back to Laverne and back to my grandparents' house, we never stopped going to church. Of course, it's the same denominational church and all familiar. The church in Paradise was familiar to my mom especially, and I remembered it at the time. And then going down to Laverne, we went to the Church of the Brethren in Laverne and in Pomona. And so it was a wonderful continuity for me. I think that familiarity of God in my life. I have no recollection of thinking I was left. That God had left me, that God had punished me, that God had, my parents, I'd give them credit for that. There was no, I wasn't dragged into the middle of anything. I can't tell you anything at all about the divorce or about anything because at that time it just wasn't talked about. And my mom and my dad both were very good at not mouthing each other and not screaming and yelling. And so as an adult, I learned more about that time. But as a kid, I couldn't have told you much about it at all. So, but life just kept rolling on. Life just kept going.
So you kept going to church.
Yep, going to church, and then in high school, we our church wasn't real large, and so the high school students could be in the choir. So I sang in the choir, real active youth group. Went on lots of. When I was a senior, I went to New York and Washington D.C. with a Church of the Brethren contingency with high school students all over the United States to learn about government. And sat in on a congressional session and went to the UN building in New York and just different things first. Spent a week doing that, attached to the church. Went to church camp. Went on 2 mission trips to Mexico. Wow. So very active youth group, a very active. High school time in the church and out of church, but in church as well.
So you had all those experiences, and how did you feel about God at that time? Were you, I myself was, yeah, it's all right.
Yeah.
A young person.
Well, I thought about that in listening to other people and having that question asked, listening to other journeys. And I thought, wow, I don't know. That when I was away from church, I don't know that I gave God a lot of thought. I was in Girl Scouts. We did a lot of backpacking and hiking, and I think the beauty of the earth. I would probably tell you I can recall, thinking how awesome God is that you hike up Grayback and it's this awesome place, and you've been hiking for 3 days with a backpack on, and how can you not? If as a Christian, how can you not just go whoa? But personally, I don't remember having too much trauma. I was not super rebellious enough, but my mom would have been disappointed in me.
Heaven forbid.
My mom disappointed was much worse than any punishment a policeman could give me. So, that not fear, that disappointment,
yes,
eternal motherly disappointment would have been bad. So it probably reined me in a lot. But as well as my Christian background, knowing it's not right, knowing what is okay and not okay, and how to be and not be. I think that influenced me more than I would care to have said at that time, probably. But
So then you graduate from high school.
yes, and I did the right thing and went to college. Isn't that what we were supposed to do? Yes.
Yes, our generation, for sure.
And
It was expected.
yes, so I did, and I went to Laverne College, which again is Church of the Brethren Generated. It originally is now a university. It's real large. It's a university. My mom went to Laverne College. I had a great uncle that taught at Laverne College, and so I don't think I thought about going anywhere else. I could have. It was right next door. I lived at home for the first semester. I moved into a dorm the second semester, and then moved into an apartment. But I think that it was a comfortable place to be. Again, that comfort level of knowing I was going to a Christian college with, by and large, Christian kids, because they were mostly generated from churches around the United States. And we had people that were not religious or not from our church. So it was an open campus, and it got larger and larger, and now it's pretty much a university. It's huge. But went there and went on a huge trip to Mexico for 6 weeks when my freshman year. And then I met my husband to be, my first husband, not Steve. my first husband.
We'll get to him.
Yeah, we'll get to him. And I was 19. I was 18 when I met him. I graduated when I was 17. So I was 18 when I met him. And we dated for about a year and then decided to get married. And I was 19 when I got married would have been in 72. And we moved, he was from Hawaii. And so we moved from Southern California to Hawaii. And we lived there for 2 years. I finished college, got my BA degree in sociology with a minor in psychology. And there's not much you can do with a major in sociology. I was told I could be a person who worked in the juvenile court system, and I'm thinking, I delete me alive. There is no way I'm going to be in a juvenile court system. So I did not go to work with my degree. I didn't use my degree at all. That one. I went back later when I was 40 and got my teaching credential in secondary education history and special education.
So you are in Hawaii. You finished college, and then you moved back here. Is that true?
Yeah, we moved back because it just wasn't the right place for us to be. A lot of family differences, and not just family, but partly cultural differences. He is Catholic. I don't know that he still is, but at the time was raised Catholic. Didn't go to church, but he was raised Catholic. We got married in our church, which didn't go over with his family very well. And just different, no connection, spiritually connected togetherness with God in church. So at that time in my life, after I went to college, I would visit church, but I didn't go to church. It wasn't a Sunday activity. It wasn't a weekly activity. It wasn't anything that I did.
And it took a back seat at that time in your life.
Yeah, social things, my friends, doing activities, going to games, doing stuff was more important for me at that time, I guess. Didn't feel I wouldn't say that. I guess I wouldn't have said it out loud then, but yeah, it was. And so when we met, we had a really great time, but we didn't have church in common. We didn't have God in common to talk about anyway. I can't speak to him about that, but anyway, together. And so I had my first son Scott in 74, and then had my second son Corey in 76. But in between that, somewhere around the time that Corey was born, we were discovering, my first husband and I were discovering that we really didn't have a lot in common. We had a great time when we had a good time together, but our
relationship wasn't deepening.
And how you live, how do you raise children, what the values are that you raise your children with, how you do day-to-day things, how you do your money, how you make decisions, how you work together, just wasn't working very well. So we got a divorce, and I had gone up to visit my dad with the kids when we were having trouble, and to sort some things out for a couple weeks, and made me realize that I just was missing a lot of things, and church was one of them that I was missing.
Mhm.
So after my divorce, I moved up to my dad's, not in his house, but well, for a little bit, but not very long.
In Boise.
Lewiston,
Right.
Lewiston,
This was
Idaho.
Lewiston. That's right.
So my dad, after he had gotten a divorce from my mom, moved up to northern Idaho to Lewiston. He'd gotten a job as an art teacher again,
Oh.
and was no longer a pastor. He did go back to being a lay pastor. Well, more than a lay pastor, he went back to actually getting ordained and being a pastor, and did guest speakers. He did weddings, funerals, things like that. Active in the church, several churches that he belonged to, preaching and doing Sunday school, things like that. But anyway, Lewiston, Idaho, which is up in the northern third of Idaho, south of Spokane.
Snake River.
Snake River, south of Spokane, Clarkston, Washington, Lewiston, Idaho are across the river from each other.
Yeah.
And I got remarried, and that would have been in like 78, 79. And again, this time though, to a man that was from, his family was Church of the Brethren. He had gone to Laverne College. I knew him at college. But he didn't go to church anymore, and had not gone to church since he left his house, his parents' house.
Mm-hmm.
So the background was there. We did much better at anything that you had to do together. We did child rearing together well. We did money well. We did living. We did respect. We did all those things that were what he knew and I grew up with.
Mm-hmm.
But he wouldn't go to church, didn't go to church, didn't want to have anything to do with church. So didn't pray as often in our house, you know, and if I look back on something that I wish I could have done different, that would be what it was. I was strong enough to go to church myself. I went to church. I took the kids. We went to church. He would not go to church, but I didn't do for my children what was done for me. I didn't ground them really, really deeply in the way I was grounded with God and with Jesus as part of my life.
I can relate to that.
Yeah. We didn't pray at meals. Might have said prayers with them sometimes at night, but not every night.
Mm-hmm.
Don't remember reading too many child story, Bible story things with them.
Well, there's something to beat yourself up about, right?
Yeah, well, no. They're good kids. No, I mean, it's something I wish I would have done. I didn't. I didn't.
I hear you.
Can I make up for it now with my grandchildren? Yes.
And you do.
And I do. We pray. Steve and I are a total different entity, and we've prayed together since we started, and we have prayed at meals, and we pray together, and we do that with our kids now, our grown kids and our grandchildren, and they expect it. My grown kids love it. It's not like it's don't do that with my kids or don't be a part of that. It's become what we are again.
Yeah.
Kind of full circle back to
So you're living in Lewiston with your second husband?
yeah, and I was teaching, and my first teaching job I think kind of prepared me for where we ended up in Haiti, which I'll get to. But I didn't tell you this, I worked on an Indian reservation the first year I taught. And I was 40 and thought I had raised 3 children up to a certain age, and I could handle this high school job as a special ed teacher. 2 days before school started, my principal asked me to teach an economics class to seniors. And because my secondary degree was in social studies, I could teach economics, although I had not seen the book. So I was thrown into not only a spontaneous teaching situation with seniors, which horrified me at that time. But I also was in a indigenous Native American school on a reservation, which is a whole different world altogether. That whole world, all the dynamics of that world are so different than what I knew.
What an experience.
Oh yeah, and Lewiston, Idaho is not a mixed cultural area. It's predominantly white. Very few Hispanics, very few blacks, fair amount of Native Americans, Nez Perce Indians, but being on the reservation high school, that's scary. It was just different. But it helped me realize, I think, looking back on that, that God prepares us for everything that we're going to do. We just don't know it.
Yes.
And he definitely threw me out of the frying pan into the fire, with being on a reservation. Way too many stories to tell, but anyway, another time. And that prepared me though for what we were going to do later. So back to Lewiston, Idaho. My life at that time, when I was going to teaching and my kids were growing up, my two oldest sons had, one was still at home just as a senior. My oldest son was gone. He went to Hawaii to live with his dad, and my daughter was a sophomore. And for the second time in my life, my world fell apart. Probably the third, because there was a traumatic, and divorce is never easy. So the first time was hard, but the second time was unexpected, not initiated by me, and a surprise. So after 16 years of being married, my husband at the time didn't love me anymore and didn't want to be married anymore. He wanted me to be his best friend, and I didn't want to be just his best friend. So
that isn't quite how it works.
No, that's not how it works. So for the second time in my life, I think I was surprised and shocked, and didn't know what to do about it. This time though, because I had not made God the middle of my life, I did a lot of beating myself up. What did I do wrong? How could I have done it different? How can I fix it? What have I done? That's pretty typical of being a person as well. Whereas the first time, being a child, but I didn't feel that. And this time it was like, wow, this is on me. Now we know that's not normally true. It's usually a two-way street. You're both
absolutely
involved in it. But
yes.
I was going to let him off the hook apparently and take it all myself. But anyway, what it made me do, or allowed me to do then, was to seek God out. And in journaling and in wondering why and how come. I never blamed God for it, or I never thought he was a bad God because this had been allowed to happen to me. That didn't enter my mind. But it was that I needed to seek him out. I needed him.
Yes.
And so I had been going to church, but I really dove into church. I didn't. I started going to prayer night, classes. I started singing in a praise and worship team, and probably for the first time in my adult life, I had an experience that I would say brought me fully back around. That humbled me, made me realize how awesome God is and what he does for people. I went to my first practice session for a praise and worship team, and there were probably 6-8 of us. Never had gone, only knew 2 people. The leader of it was a doctor. She said, hey, if you want to come, why don't you come join us? And I took her up on it, and they were sitting down kind of on the steps of the sanctuary where they were going to practice. And I walked in, they said, oh, have a seat, we're waiting for Sherry, she's not here yet. And I said, oh, okay. And they said, we usually pray, so we're down here, we're waiting because we usually pray before we start. And I said, okay. And she rushed in, apologizing for being late, and sat down, and she looked at me, she said, you came? And I said, yeah, I'm here. She introduced me and said, well, let's pray, and then we can practice. And I didn't realize that they went around and everybody prayed. Everybody spoke. And I realized this after I'd shut my eyes, and the first person next to me started talking, and it was going around, and I'm thinking,
oh no,
it's coming to me. and I'm really not all too sure I wanted to pray out loud. I hadn't done much of it, if any, and I wasn't sure I wanted to start doing that. And what happened, by the time they got to me, I wasn't sure I could even speak, because every single person in that group prayed for me. They didn't know me. They didn't know I was going through a horrendous time in my life, that I was feeling beat up and worthless. They didn't know that, but God put me on their hearts, and every single one of those people prayed for me, that God would be a part of my life, that they were glad I was there. They were happy that I had joined them. And by the time that got to me, I don't even remember what I said, if I could even talk.
You were blubbering, probably.
But yeah, but God came back into my life that moment. I asked, they asked,
Yes.
they asked for me.
Yes. Oh wow.
And it was, as an adult, the first time I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I'm back, and you're back in my life, and how could I have blocked you out for as long as I did?
Wow.
So, born again phrase, no, probably, I don't know, but pretty close to
Just
that.
an aha moment, that's for sure.
Was a God moment, and church and praying and back to what was me. I guess I realized that what I knew, that God would forgive me of anything, and I didn't feel like it until I had him back in my life again, and then I knew, and I didn't. That doesn't mean I didn't have moments of still beating myself up, but I knew that he was there, that he was holding on to me, and I was going to be okay.
Well, we're real good at beating ourselves up.
And
that's why God's there.
Excellent.
Tap us on the shoulder and say, hey,
hello.
Let that go. I'm here.
Or the 2x4. I get 2x4s.
Do you?
It's not just
That's much
taps on
more
the shoulder.
painful.
Yeah.
For heaven's sakes.
Yeah.
Wow.
So my life changed that moment, and not only with God, but it also made me resolved in the fact that I knew that, and I think I used this phrase when we were talking, that glue that holds you together with God and your spouse, hopefully, there's a glue there, and if you don't have God as that glue, then things can happen. In that opinion, bad things can happen.
Mm-hmm.
Hard things can happen. They can happen anyway, but if you have the glue, you can make it through it. If you don't have the glue, it's really tough.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew I didn't want to have a relationship with anyone again unless I had glue. And with God back in my life, I was more confident of that. So now comes Steve. And do we hear angels now? Yeah, I'm smiling. And I'm smiling because I feel very blessed. Very, very blessed that I have an opportunity to have a relationship with my husband that has the glue.
Mm-hmm.
And we did it did from the beginning. The first date we went on, I remember me talking about church. Would you come to church with me? Will you come to church with me? And he said yes. And that.
So you met him in what, the mid 90s?
Yeah, it would have been 95.
95.
Yeah, early, like Super Bowl 95.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
early.
Yeah, early. Yeah, Super Bowl 95.
Mm.
And yeah. Anyway, and so we started dating, and I asked him if he wanted to go on a mission trip. I'd signed up for a mission trip before I met him, and he said no. I've been in Vietnam. I've been in a lot of third world countries. I don't care to go to another one. I know what it's like. I've been there, done that. I'm not going to go.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, okay, well, I'm going. And he said, well, fine. And I said, all right. And
see you when you get back.
Yeah, a week later or so, I asked him again. I remember saying at that time, I said, well, if you really love me, if you want a relationship, if you really love me, you would go to Haiti with me. And he still said no. And so I kind of went, oh, okay. And about a week later, I must have asked him again, and he again said, no, I don't think so. And I said, if you really love me, if you really, really want this relationship with me, you would really go with me. And he said, I don't think so. And I said, well, okay. But the third time I asked him.
All right. Persistence.
Mm-hmm, he said yes. Now, whether it was just to get me to quit asking him, or whether he decided that, yeah, he loved me enough, he would do that. I like the second scenario better. So,
of course. It's probably true.
It's probably true. But anyway, we did go. We went in September of 95. Still not married. And we went to Haiti, to a hospital in the middle of the valley in the middle of the country, and worked for 10 days. Much like what we did in Mexico, but it was much more intense, working in pretty, inclusive is not the right word, but immersed. He worked at a tuberculosis village, painting we say he painted cockroaches blue because there were big ones in this. But anyway, he painted he painted at a tuberculosis village, and I worked in the hospital and did inventory and did all kinds of stuff in the hospital. But with people, with Haitians, we were surrounded by people, and we both fell in love with the place and talked about it incessantly. I mean, it was all we talked about. My daughter, being she was a sophomore that year, she told us to finally be quiet or do something about it. We talked about it so much. She said, either stop talking about this and get on with life, or make it part of your life or something, because you guys, it's getting old. You're just talking about it all the time.
So you invited her along.
Yeah. So
We'll do something about it.
yeah, so we'll fix this. At Christmas that year, the reason we went was one of our friends' dads was a recruiter for the hospital we worked in, to get people to volunteer, to get people to work there from Europe and Canada and the United States. And so he came and talked to us, and we asked for applications. He said it usually takes a little while, a year or 2 years, and we thought, perfect. My daughter Robin would be out of high school by
Who
then.
was born the day Mount St. Helens blew
That's
up.
right. I didn't say when she was born, did I? No, she was born on May 17th, 1980. Can't forget
To a big bang.
Yeah, can't forget her birthday or how old she is or when Mount St. Helens blew up. So
I digress. I'm
yes,
sorry,
thank you.
but-
I'm glad you said that. I forgot not to say that. But anyway, she would have been out of high school, and we figured that was perfect timing. Empty nest syndrome. The kids are gone. We'll go for 2 years, which was the commitment at this place, and we'll work in Haiti for 2 years, and we'll come back and get back to regular life, right? And so we filled it out. And a week later, this gentleman called from Florida and asked Steve if he could get 2 weeks off to go look at a project he had in Haiti at the hospital. They had got a grant, and they needed an engineer and someone that knew things to do it. And Steve had a degree in engineering, so he said, I could look at it for you. So he got time off in February, and he went for 2 weeks. No emails, no phone, no communication except writing letters, communication.
Good old days.
Yeah.
Or not.
And so I knew I wouldn't talk to him. So before he left, he said, if I like this and they offer me a job, should I take it? And I said, well, yeah, if we get married, I'll go where you go. I'll wherever you go, I'll go. What a statement that is. So he went. And he came back, got off the plane, we talked, and he said, did you really mean that you would go where I went? You would, follow me and be with me, we'd get married and we'd do that. And I said, what did you do? and he said, well, I signed a 2-year contract, but they have a job for you too for 2 years. And I went, great. When does it start? Well, as soon as we get married. I was teaching junior high. And spring break was at the end of March. So on March 30th, 1996, we got married. And 2 weeks later, after our honeymoon, 2 weeks later, he went to Haiti. And I followed with my mom and my daughter in June of 96.
And to finish out the school year.
Yeah, I had to finish my school year. Well, I chose to finish my school year. And then we left, but there's kind of two funny things to this story. One is he said that his version is that we sold his truck and his house and his boat and paid off our debts because we needed to be debt free before we could go over there, because he got paid $300 a month and I got paid $250 a month.
All right.
And on that kind of income, when you have to feed yourselves, there's nothing going home to pay bills. So we had to be debt free when we went, and we did. God does lots of things for us, and
He sure does.
He managed to get us debt free. We worked hard at it, but we did it. And I would tell you that he left me. I had to have surgery the week after. 3 days before he left, 4 days before he left. I had surgery and I got out of the hospital, and he left, and I had to recuperate for 6 weeks. So I tell him, well, we sold your stuff, but you left me to pack because we had to have renters in our house. So everything in my house then had to be packed up,
stored,
like you were leaving. Yeah. So he left me with all the packing, all the travel arrangements, all the stuff to do while I was incapacitated for 6 weeks. So we both have our versions of that story.
Yeah,
who we
yeah.
can talk to. Anyway,
You're the champion.
there you go. We did that, and like I said, my mom and my daughter went. Robin spent a year, her junior year abroad, kind of kicking and screaming. She didn't really want to go to Haiti for her junior year abroad. She would rather pick Spain, Italy,
Well, yeah,
Germany,
absolutely.
Iceland, anywhere, but not Haiti.
Anywhere exotic.
Yeah, but after she got there, it was a life-changing experience for her. So she would not have traded that for Italy, I don't think, at that point. I believe a lot of who she is today
Stems from that.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
she's a social worker and saw so many things there, experienced so many things there. That being a minority, one of them, I laugh when I
Yes.
watch and hear and listen to all the political things going on now and realize that most people have no clue what a Black person or a Hispanic person or minority goes through on a daily
I had the
basis.
same thing happen to me going to Europe and
Yeah.
seeing other cultures and
Yeah.
how that changes your
And being white
perception.
in a Black country,
you get to feel
it's you stand out. You're not always well liked. Americans go home, even if you're helping, even if you're doing good things, it doesn't matter. So anyway, she learned a lot of things, and it was good for her. It was really good. And my mom, ironically enough, and I didn't tell you this, came back every year that we were there. She came back for 3 to 4 months and wintered in Haiti.
really.
Yeah, and
So she was coming from Idaho.
Idaho. Yeah, and she would stay from January till May, and loved it. And she loved the people.
Awesome.
And every house we lived in, she came and visited everywhere we went. And the last year that she was alive, she was in a wheelchair, and I made promises children make, like a lot of us do, that I would never let my parents go into a nursing home. They were going to live with me, right? So true to that word, we put her on a plane, wheelchair to seat. I did, and in Haiti, chair to wheelchair, and she could use a walker, so we used it a lot. The last year of her life, she lived in Haiti with us, up on a mountain.
Oh, wow.
Hospital. My house help. We couldn't have asked for better 24-hour care. When we weren't there, they were there. She loved it. She was at peace. She was happy. Different, but she had learned to love that lifestyle, and she'd learned to love the people.
So did she pass away there?
No, we did the mother-daughter thing where we really didn't get along too well when we lived together, and both recognized it when one day she just wasn't. She was 84, and she just didn't want to eat. At that point, she didn't want to eat. She didn't want to get in her chair. She didn't want to do anything. And I, being stubborn daughter that I am, was getting her out of bed. And she looked at me. She said, "I don't like you very well." And I said, "Well, that's okay. I don't like you very well either." we're both feeling the same way. I said, "I love you with my whole heart, but I don't like you right now." And she said, "That's kind of how I'm feeling." I said, "So what are we going to do about this?" And she said, "Well, you could put me in a retirement center, just not a home, but like a assisted living." And she said, "I think I could take directions from a nurse before I could take directions from you." And I said, "I bet you could." and that's kind of how we left it. And so I went back in October, and I took her home. We found a really good place in town, very compassionate, good place. And she really, really, really loved it.
Good.
But she was only there 2 months, and she got the flu. This was in 2005.
Oh, wow.
Christmas Eve, I went back for Christmas because that was part of our promise and to each other. Steve didn't come. I went back at Christmas and took her to Christmas Eve service at church and communion at church. And we went out and had pie and ice cream afterwards. And then I took her back, said I'd get her the next morning to go to, Christmas Day was on Sunday that year. And I said I'd pick her up and take her to church. And we'd go to church on Sunday. And she said, "Great." So I told her goodnight and took her in, told her goodnight, and called at 7 the next morning to see if she was going to be ready to go by the time I picked her up. And she said, I'm sick. I've been sick all night long. I've got the flu. I'm going both ways. I can't hardly get out of bed. I'm really weak. I can't go. And I said, well, it's Christmas. I'll come later this afternoon. She goes, no, you won't. She said, you're leaving on Friday to go back to Haiti. She says, I won't hear of it. She says, I'll see you in a day or two when I'm feeling better. But I am sicker than a dog. I can't get out of bed and you are not going to get this. And I said, okay, well, I'll call you. And I called her several times that day. I called her that evening. And every time I called, the nurse would answer the phone or the aide would answer the phone. And she would say, she's really sick. If you want to talk to her, you won't be able to talk to her very long. She's very weak. She's really sick. I said, okay. And so I talked to her at probably 9 o'clock that night. And the next morning at 7, I got a phone call and she'd passed away.
Oh, wow.
Not what I expected.
Never is.
Never is. But ever so thankful. And God has just had me covered. That I was there.
Yes.
I was there and I spent the most amazing Christmas Eve with my mom that I will never forget.
A gift of God.
Yeah. Yeah. So just every time that I've been in pain, I've been covered, and I can't explain it any better than that. So part of my life, absolutely, Haiti was a spiritual walk from the get-go. There was not a day that passed that prayer didn't hold us together, that people praying for us when we didn't even know they needed to pray for us held us together. Many life-threatening situations that could have taken our lives that didn't take our lives, not by luck, not by chance, but by God. The Haitian Christians that I met in every place we lived, their faith is
enviable.
Yeah, it's they live it, feel it, breathe it, see it. It's we were building the last place we were living in, and one of the church families lived near the little small tiny skinny road that we had to go by a river. And the river wasn't right there. The river was down probably 30-40 feet, an embankment, and it wasn't a slope. It was like a cutout embankment, because when it flooded it would tear up the sides. Right? So it was very, very sheer, not rocky, just mud and dirt, but sheer. And when we got there, we were working all day with the team, and it started raining, and it had been raining. It was rainy season, so it had been raining for several days. So it wasn't just dirt on this road, it was mud, clay-like mud. And on our way back, we went by the caretaker's house for this area, like I said, a member of our church, and she was out doing something in the yard and waved at us. And we got to the part that was kind of eroded away, and we had a big truck, and Steve had to be careful what he was doing to go along this stretch, probably 15 feet of embankment. And excuse me. And so we started to go on it, and the truck started. We were in the back of the truck. There, they don't care. So we were in the back of the truck, in the back of the truck.
Yes.
There were probably 10 of us, and we're in the back of the truck, and the back of the truck starts doing this. So Steve like stops, because he could still stop without sliding into the river, and the tires are kind of doing the spinny thing in the mud, and so he says, "Everybody out," and so we all get out, and Madam Ben comes over and says, "What's wrong?" to me, and I say, "Well, we have to get home, and we have to get the truck by here, and I don't know how we're going to do that." And so Steve first says, "I'm going to take it across, and if it's only me, and I'll be okay." Well, there were about 6 guys, and they said, "No, that mud will take you right off the edge. You drive, and we're going to stand on the edge, riverside of this truck, and we're going to push it
back."
So, only in Haiti.
Yeah.
So,
or the Dominican Republic.
Yeah. Madam Ben looks at me, and I said, "I don't know." She said, "Our job is to pray." I said, "You're right." And she said, "Okay." And we turn and hold hands and start praying in Creole and English, mixed up prayers, and try not to watch and try not to listen. And they did it, but I'm glad I wasn't watching. They were real close, multiple times of all of the truck taking all of them down into the water. One of 1,000 stories. But that prayer, I wish I could have recorded, and I wish I could have people hear what it sounds like in the churches in Haiti when they pray in church. At least twice during the service, they pray out loud, individually, out loud, which means you've got 60 to 80 people praying out loud, not quietly, mind you, out loud, beseeching God for things they need, crying out.
Cacophony for God.
Yeah, and crying out, and it's all in this language I understood at that time, but it's like imagining what the tongues sounded like, or the hearing something in tongues when you can't understand anything else, but you know what people are saying, or you know what they're saying to God, or what God's saying to them. Goosebumps. It's really awesome. So I think that those things in my life, of course, solidified my faith, solidified knowing that bad things happen, but God's always there, and He will have my back, and He is my glue.
And so you were there for 16 years?
16 years, from 96 to 2011, so probably 15 years. But yeah. And we were at four different places. The first one was not a mission, religious mission. It was a there's a word for what kind of when it's
secular?
Philanthropic. It was done by Mellon family. And anyway, and Mellon money, big money, banking, tires. Anyway. But a lot of Christian people worked there because it was a good place to work. You didn't get paid anything, and so you were really volunteering. You were doing ministry. We had a small church, and of just the workers that were there, and it was really good. But it was not a mission, and I would have told you that growing up, I would never have seen myself doing that. Yeah. What we did. We had missionaries come to our church when I was a kid. They would come and they would visit. They'd stay in our house. They'd talk about their things, and
they'd be the guest speaker at Sunday.
Yeah, do the spiel for help support us kind of thing. And but in my mind, a missionary was a spinster lady. I could tell you what a missionary was. It was an old lady, old by kid standards, an old lady that was
probably 40.
Yeah. With a spinster that never had gotten married because God and church and the Lord were her whole life, and she evangelized and preached and Bible thumped. That's what a missionary did out in the middle of nowhere. So I was never going to be that.
So you mentioned that you were doing this for your daughter's growing up years, or I mean.
Oh, that, yeah. When it was time to come home, we realized that we asked ourselves, why are we going home? Because every time we'd finished a job, someone else would ask us to work. So it was kind of God leading us through the country of Haiti. We never got way up north, but we went everywhere else. And every time one door would close, another door would open, and it would be like, okay, God, we're good. We would come home once a year. We had a couple stints where we didn't come home, maybe for 2 years. We came home every year. We saw family, my mom, my dad, family, my kids that were living in the area. Always went to visit them. But my daughter was 16 when she was 16, almost 17 when she went back for her senior year in high school. Lived with her dad. And so that was okay with her. That was fine. But when we came back, she was 32. And I realized that I had spent half of her life without her. Or she spent half of her life without me, I guess. That's the better way of putting it. That I had missed so many things. And the boys are different.
Yes, son's a son till he takes a wife, a daughter's a daughter for the rest of her life.
There you go. That would be it. And so, the boys, not that she wasn't independent, she was very independent, but I know there were times where I should have been around. It would have been easier for her had I been around. maybe at the time she might not have thought it or said it, but as a 32-year-old, I imagine she's thought it. I wasn't there during this trauma, or we were there when her kids were born. We did come back to do that. We did come back for weddings, and we did come back for her oldest child's christening, that kind of thing.
Yes.
But not
events, but not daily.
No, but not emotional events. And so looking back on that, I don't really think I know I don't feel like I've ever sacrificed anything, physically, monetarily. We were always taken care of. God always found a way to take care of us, and so we were never wanting. I still believe that the riches that we gained way far outweigh the things we didn't have. My biggest regret, and it's not a regret, but my biggest thinking in that way is when I think about my daughter. And so when we came back, primarily because Steve had cancer, needed to have it treated, also had a knee that needed to be replaced. And we could have probably taken care of that and gone back on the field again. We would have been welcomed. The work was still progressing in the place we were at. But in being back with my kids, and there was no way I could do it again. And I really don't. I think that was put in front of us, and those things were put in front of us partly so that we would come back. We needed to come back, and God knew I needed to reestablish my relationship with my kids.
Absolutely.
We both did.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it was harder to come back here and live than it was to go there and live. Not relationally, I don't mean family wise, but
culture wise.
Yeah. See, it was exciting for me to go there. It was exciting. I learned a new language. I learned a new culture. I was always learning, constantly learning. My faith was strong. I felt good about my life. And then to come back and see how we live in the United States and the things that we have that we don't appreciate. And it doesn't take you long. I mean, didn't even take a year for us to get back into being more materialistic. But when we had nothing materialistically, had absolutely nothing, always had water, didn't have electricity, didn't have hot water, didn't have...
Well, you had the most important, water.
Yeah, had water. Not always we had to go get it. But anyway, not running water always. Gravity water. But anyway, to come back to a world of my daughter can put it the best. She came back as a 16-year-old and had gone shopping with us in Haiti. We had mostly outdoor shopping, not a lot of store shopping, and outdoor market shopping. And her dad took her to the grocery store to get the things she needed, went right off the plane kind of thing. You need toothbrush, you need this, you need that, right? And she said, she stood in front of the toothbrush aisle and couldn't make up her mind. There were shelves of toothbrushes, and she couldn't decide if she wanted what, soft or medium, large, small, blue, purple, pink, and her dad found her and he goes, "What are you doing?" And she said, I can't pick a toothbrush. And he said, "Why not?" She goes, "Because there's a choice."
Not so in Haiti.
No. And so that just brings you back to the choices we have.
Right.
Are huge. They're overwhelming. They're never ending. And because of that, we don't depend on the basics of our life relationally with God or with our family or with our spouse. We don't have to. We don't need to. Because we know better. We can take care of ourselves. We're self-sufficient.
We think.
Yeah, no.
So you moved out here in 2014?
So we came back from Haiti in 2011, and on my second son, if he was listening to this, would have to forgive me because I cannot remember the year he got married. I should have looked it up, but I didn't. But while we were in Haiti, a few years before we came back, he got married, and he got married in Grapeview at his boss's property, and it was an outdoor wedding. We camped. We came back for like 2 weeks, and we camped a few days before the wedding, a couple days after the wedding, and it was beautiful out here. And so I started doing what I do to Steve, which is, we could really move closer to the children. And it's like, no, he grew up in Seattle. I mean, not grew up, he from 78 to I think, he lived in Seattle,
Mhm.
Kent. I'm not going back there. I am not going back to the city. I am not going back to Washington State. I am not going to live there. Oh, okay. I didn't say this time if you really love me, you would do
Okay.
that, but I didn't do that. I might have implied. No, I didn't imply it. No, I didn't even imply that. I don't think. But anyway, but after talking about it multiple times, saying, really, we could move closer, not in the city, but we could live closer. He started looking at websites and stuff for this area, and so we found a house. It's in Timber Lakes near Shelton, other side, half hour from everywhere.
I'm familiar with it.
And when we knew the house closed and I knew where we were going to live, I started looking for a church. I really think that's backwards. I think you should look for a church and visit it a bunch and fall in love with it.
Then find a house.
Then buy your house. Because we did it backwards. We found our house, fell in love with New Community Church of Union and the people. And the area is all the same. Like our house looks like this. So, but it's a half an hour away. And so more commitment on our part to be actively involved, and we weren't for a couple of years because it was just that hour long trip. So if you help prep for the dinner and then you come back and work the dinner and then you volunteer to clean up for the dinner, you've got 3 hours of traveling time, let alone when you're spending. So for a while especially, it kind of stopped us from immersing ourselves into some.
Well, you seem to have been making up for it.
Yeah. We got the hang of it.
So you started
tried.
attending here in 14, you mentioned. And so only 2 years later, we go
we go to Mexico.
We go to Mexico
Yeah.
on a mission that is headed by you and Steve.
Yeah.
So didn't take you long.
Well, yeah, it depends on whose timeline you're looking at. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
But it's just it's good to that God. I was going to say, see that luck word. I don't like it. That God leads us in the directions He wants us to be for the right time, for the right place. Looking back's wonderful because you can see it.
Well, yeah, and you don't quite realize it at the time.
No.
So many times.
No.
Yeah.
Especially when it's happy things, you might always say, "Well, see, God knows what He's doing." When it's not happy things, no.
Where was God?
Yeah, but even my dad's death happened while we were home on visiting. So I think that there are. I know that when you can put your faith in God, when you can put your whole faith in God, when you can say, "This is my life. You have it. It's yours," and if you can believe it. And not grab it back, because that's what I want to do. I want to. We're all good grab at that. It back.
Yes.
Indian give it. You can't have it, God. I know better than you. Then He will be your glue, and He will hold you together, even during hard stuff that you get to do. So, I am fortunate that Steve and I have that glue. I never doubt when He says He loves me that He loves me, and then when He says He's going to love me forever, He will. And it's such an amazing thing in a relationship to not ever doubt that or second guess that.
Yes.
And so God's been amazing in my life from when I was born. I walked away a couple times, but not far. And
He's always there.
But He took care of me anyway.
Yeah. Even when you didn't even know it.
And when I didn't want it, yeah.
Yes, both of those.
Put me in the right spot when I decided I wanted it. And I am grateful for that and for being in my kids' and my grandchildren's lives.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it is awesome.
Well, can I ask you if there's anything you've left out? Anything? Well... We don't want to.
Okay, be careful.
Overdo it.
Yeah, be careful.
But quite a journey.
Yes.
I thought I knew you. Now I know you better.
Now you know me better.
we spent that time together in Mexico, and that was a lot of work. There was some gnashing of teeth and some joyous stuff.
Pastor Terry, when I went to him saying I can't do this because this is not a team. This is 10 people going and doing the same thing, but I cannot get these people together to my satisfaction. He said to me, it's okay. It's like butterflies. It's like herding butterflies. You just need a bigger net. It's like, that wasn't the answer I was looking for, but okay. So we were a herd of butterflies.
Yes, we were.
And
not what you were accustomed to, but
yeah. And my net was just got bigger and bigger and bigger.
well, it was quite the memory, and
it was.
And I think,
and we'll do it again.
Yes, you
Yeah.
can't stay away from it, can you?
No, no.
Well, we're glad.
It's not this is necessarily. I think it's that wanting. Oh, I so desire for people to know what I feel, what I have felt,
Mhm.
and to know what I know. I'm not an evangelist. I will not stand on a corner. Oh, now see, don't tell God no. I will not stand on a corner. Unless you ask me to.
Yeah.
But I want people to feel that. What you felt in the Dominican Republic when you went, what you felt in Mexico at times, even the fatigue, even the dependence on God, the trials that happen make you dependent on God. And it didn't need to be a physical threat. It didn't need to be, oh my gosh, am I going to die? It could have been. It can be anything that pulls people together because God is a part of their life. And until you get out of your comfort zone and the things you have every day that you know are there, that you can go to the refrigerator and get, or turn on a faucet and get,
Yes.
you have no clue how hot it can be, or how miserable it can be, or how poor people can be.
Mm-hmm.
Poverty is all relative, and third world countries show you what that is.
Yes. Well, Haiti's the poorest country, isn't
Yes.
it, in the
Western Hemisphere.
Western Hemisphere? So.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, but it's rich. So it's
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
In many other areas,
It's rich.
and even richer
Yeah.
than
Yes.
us.
Mm-hmm. Very much so. And so I think, all those things. And so, yes, I desire missions. I desire people to even go to the Appalachians, go to inner city, and don't just spend an hour or half hour. Spend a week.
Yeah.
In a tenement building. Can you imagine being in a tenement building where there's more cockroaches than there are people, and when there's no electricity sometimes and very little water? You don't have to go to Haiti, but to experience that. Yeah.
Yeah, it can really mold you.
Yeah, and make your faith stronger.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So thank you.
Well, this was wonderful.
Yeah, wasn't so bad.
Oh, and we're done. So, thank you
You're welcome.
for sharing, and we'll see you next time. Michael will be back, so
It's been fun.
rest assured. Yes, it has. I was bemoaning it, but things work out
See, God's good.
for the better. Yes. Praise be to God.
Yes.
And we thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time. God bless.
The journey begins at the narrow gate. The journey, Jesus beckons me to roam. The journey, where the path is straight. The journey takes me home.